The house that eats the living. The rain fell in curtains as Miles Keene turned the rusted key inside the heavy iron gate. It groaned like a dying animal, echoing across the hollow hills. Before them stood Blackthorn House, a place spoken of in whispers and warned of in screams. It was said the house was built in 1879 by a man who went mad while constructing it. By the time it was finished, he'd vanished without a trace. His workers found the blueprints soaked in blood and the cellar bricked shut from the inside. Since then, no family stayed more than a few weeks. Most left broken. A few never left at all. Miles wasn't here for the legend. He was here for proof. Behind him, the others waited, Layla, his girlfriend, logical, blunt, and deeply afraid of nothing. Theo, the jokester with a drone for every occasion. And Jules, who said nothing but kept filming, even as lightning flashed and the air grew thick with dread. "You sure this is the right house?" Theo joked. "Looks like Satan's summer home." Layla rolled her eyes. "Let's just get inside. We're getting soaked." They passed the gate and stepped onto the gravel path, but it didn't feel like gravel. Miles looked down. What should have been loose stones now looked like old teeth, mottled, yellowed, cracked. He blinked. The stones were just stones. But unease slithered into his gut like a worm under the skin. The front door loomed before them, 12 feet tall, black as coal, carved with symbols that didn't look human. Miles ran a hand across them, and his fingers tingled. Not cold. Not heat. Something else. He turned the doorknob. It wasn't locked. It was waiting. The interior was soaked in darkness. The air was damp, reeking of old decay and something worse, like something had been alive and died badly. The house moaned under their footsteps, a groan that didn't sound like wood, it sounded like a throat being cleared. Theo flew his drone into the main hall. The screen showed a sweeping view. Staircase curled like a ribcage, portraits whose eyes had been scratched out, and a chandelier that looked suspiciously like it had fingernails dangling from its ends. "This place is metal," Theo whispered. "Creepy as hell." As they moved deeper, the house shifted. Walls seemed closer than before. Hallways that led somewhere now led nowhere. Windows vanished behind curtains that hadn't been there a moment ago. And then, the first scream. Layla. They rushed into the drawing room and found her staring at the fireplace. In it burned a flame, though no wood was there. Just bones. Dozens. Maybe hundreds. On the mantel, a mirror reflected something wrong. In the reflection, Layla's face twisted into a grin, not her own. Her eyes were black holes. Her mouth stretched wide, far wider than humanly possible. But when they turned around, Layla was fine. Pale, shaken, but fine. "It showed me something," she said. It said my name." Theo laughed nervously. "It's just a mirror. Probably rigged or something." Then the mirror shattered, without being touched. Miles finally spoke. "We shouldn't be here." But the door was no longer there. The house had closed behind them. And somewhere beneath the floor, something crawled. Something large. With fingers. And too many joints. They should have been able to backtrack. The entrance hall was behind them. Just 30 feet. That's what Miles kept saying, over and over. But every turn led to a wall. Every door led somewhere else. The layout was wrong. Gravity felt tilted. Shadows moved where there were no light sources. Layla touched the wall and drew back with a hiss. "What?" Jules asked, still filming. "It's breathing." Miles placed his hand against it. It was warm. And beneath the wallpaper, barely perceptible, was a slow rise and fall, like a massive lung inhaling and exhaling. Theo stepped back, muttering, "Nope. Nope. This is some Hellraiser-level crap. Thump. The sound came from behind a nearby door. Thump. 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 Something hitting wood. Slowly. Rhythmic. Not banging. Knocking. What if someone's trapped in there? Layla whispered. Miles reached for the doorknob, his hand shaking. The metal was slick, as if coated in saliva. He turned it. The door opened. And there was no room. Just a hallway, narrow, bone-white, and pulsing like a throat. The floor was soft. Moist. The walls twitched when they brushed against them. This isn't architectural space, Jules murmured, the first words he'd spoken since entering. This is biological. No, this is insane, Theo snapped. We go back. Find a window. Smash it. I don't care if it cuts my damn face off. But Miles was already walking forward. If the house is alive, it's playing with us. We don't give it what it wants. Which is what? Layla asked. Miles didn't answer. They continued down the hallway, but the more they walked, the longer it stretched. After 5 minutes, they reached a door on the left. But when Theo opened it, it was his bedroom. From back home. Posters, socks on the floor, his old dog's bed in the corner. A faint sound played on loop, his father yelling at him. A voice he hadn't heard since the funeral. Theo stepped in, dazed. Dude, don't. Miles yelled. But it was too late. The door slammed shut. A horrible ripping sound echoed through the hallway. Then, silence. When they reopened the door, the room was empty. But the ceiling and walls were now painted red, with something thick. Layla turned and vomited. Jules dropped the camera. In the corner of the room, someone, or something, had written in dripping black letters, "He's still in here." They ran. Not away, there was nowhere to go, but forward, down the twisting passage. And that's when they found the library. Thousands of books filled the shelves, but every single one was missing its title. Miles opened one. The pages were filled with teeth. Not pictures, real teeth, embedded in the paper, wriggling slightly like maggots. Another book showed footage, moving footage, of their entrance into the house, but the footage wasn't what happened. It showed them dismembering each other. Slowly. Lovingly. In the final frame, Jules was holding his own head like a lantern. I want to leave, Layla said. We have to find the basement. Old stories say that's where the blueprints were found. Maybe there's a way out. Jules was trembling now, muttering to himself, this house is wrong, it's a mouth. It's digesting us. Suddenly, the shelves began to close around them, books launching themselves from the walls, flapping like birds, pages slicing the air. One struck Miles across the cheek, tearing skin. Layla grabbed Jules. They ran through another door, and found themselves in a room with no ceiling. Above them, a void stretched into nothingness. And in that void, something watched. It had no form. Only eyes. Endless, red, watching eyes. As if the house itself was conscious and pleased. Like they were inside a body, and it had finally noticed them squirming. A low gurgling sound echoed through the walls. Not mechanical. Not human. Digestive. Layla turned slowly. Behind them, the doorway was gone. Now, only a fleshy wall blocked them in, pulsing, twitching. And then parting, like a wound being forced open. From the blackness beyond, something crawled out. Its limbs were too long. Its face was like melted wax, no eyes, only a twisted grin that reached from temple to temple. It wore Theo's drone, broken, impaled through its ribs. It gurgled 3 words, in Theo's voice, let me out. Jules screamed. But no sound escaped his lips. Because suddenly, the room swallowed the light. And the screaming began. Darkness swallowed the room whole. Not the kind of darkness that comes from a lack of light. This was total, living darkness. It crawled inside their lungs and wrapped around their thoughts. It pressed against their eyes from the inside, as though the house wasn't just removing the light, it was erasing the concept of sight altogether. Then came the voices. Soft at first. Murmurs. Choked gasps. Weeping. Jules clung to Layla's arm, trembling like a child. Miles reached for the flashlight clipped to his belt, but when it flickered on, the beam didn't cut through the black. Instead, it revealed faces, hovering inches away. Faces with no skin. Miles screamed. The light blinked out. Somewhere in the pitch, Layla shouted, "Don't move. Don't let it separate us." But the floor shifted beneath them. It wasn't wood anymore. It was soft. And wet. Like the inside of a throat. It rippled. Then it opened. They fell. No sound. No end. Just falling. Through air that thickened into syrup, then blood, then something else. Until finally, they landed. But not with a crash. More like a birth. The room they fell into was enormous and silent. A cathedral of grotesque design. The walls were made of people, some real, some statues, some twitching slowly, their mouths sewn shut. Each one frozen in various moments of terror. Some curled into fetal positions. Others impaled on rebar, or with their heads twisted fully around. And high above them, hanging from the ceiling like a chandelier, was Theo's body. Or what was left of it. His face was still twitching, mouth moving without sound, as something squirmed beneath his skin, like insects burrowing through meat. Layla covered her mouth. "Oh my God. Theo," a whisper came from the shadows behind them. "You're not the first." Jules turned. A girl, no older than 16, stood there barefoot in a tattered nightgown. Her eyes were milky white, but she saw them. Her skin was gray, lips stitched tight except for a single tear in the corner of her mouth. Miles stepped forward. "Who are you?" She didn't respond directly. She just turned and pointed to a wall. As the others followed her gesture, a section of the wall peeled itself open like a wound. Inside it was a room, frozen in time. A 1950s living room. Black and white television. A man and a woman sitting on a couch, unmoving, smiling too wide. Their eyes were rotted jelly. But they were alive. Barely. The girl whispered again. They were the first to ignore the warnings. The house doesn't kill. It absorbs. It learns you. Makes rooms from your memories. From your fears. Until you fit. Until you belong. Layla trembled. "How do we get out?" The girl stared at her for a long moment, and then whispered, "You don't." She stepped backward into the shadows, and vanished completely. Not a single sound. Not even a footstep. The others stared, hollow-eyed. Jules finally broke. "We have to kill ourselves." "What?" Layla hissed. "It's the only way," Jules said, pacing, eyes wild. "You saw Theo. You saw him. If this house keeps us alive like that, like them, I'd rather die." "Shut up," Miles snapped. "We're not giving it what it wants." "You think it wants us dead?" Jules spat. "No. It wants us forever. We're not people to it. We're furniture. We're decor. We're ingredients." He began pulling something from his coat pocket. A knife. "Stop it." Layla screamed. But it was too late. Jules raised the knife, and plunged it into his chest. Or he tried. The blade bent. Like it hit rubber. Jules gasped. What the? His body convulsed. Then cracked. From beneath his skin, tiny limbs pressed outward, hundreds of them. Fingers. Hands. Claws. As if something had been growing inside him all along. Jules screamed as his mouth opened wider and wider, until it split his jaw in two. Blood sprayed. Then smoke. Then something black and wet crawled out of his mouth and vanished into the walls. He fell still. Layla was screaming. Miles dragged her out of the chamber as the walls began to pulse, reacting to Jules' death like blood to fresh meat. Corridors shifted. Doors appeared. Then vanished. Miles grabbed a doorknob and wrenched it open, only to find a room full of people. Dozens of them. Some sitting. Some standing. All of them staring at walls. Motionless. Blank-eyed. Skin gray and paper-thin. Each was whispering something under their breath. Layla leaned in. They were saying the same thing, over and over. Don't blink. Don't look away. Don't blink. Don't look away. Then all at once, they turned. Every single one of them. And smiled. They slammed the door shut. Miles shoved his body against it, but it didn't budge. The whispering from behind it had stopped. But the silence was worse. It felt like the house was holding its breath. Layla collapsed to her knees, hands over her face. Jules is dead. Theo is, whatever that thing was. And we're next. Miles crouched beside her. We're still alive. That means something. The house wants something. Layla looked at him. It's feeding on us. Miles hesitated. Then nodded. That word felt right. Not just death. Not pain. Consumption. But this wasn't about flesh. Not yet. This house devoured fear. It fed on memories. On trauma. It burrowed inside you, made a nest in your brain, then rewrote reality from the inside out. Suddenly, the floor creaked beneath them. Only it wasn't creaking like wood. It was chewing. The floor split. And they were swallowed. They landed in pitch-dark sludge. The air was thick with the stench of rot and bile. The walls were made of some kind of slick tissue, pulsating slowly, throbbing like a living wound. And they weren't alone. Bodies floated. Hundreds. Maybe more. Some dead. Some still twitching. Their eyes followed Miles and Layla as they moved through the filth, arms out, feeling for walls. Where are we? Layla gasped, gagging. What is this place? Miles said nothing. He was staring ahead. At the giant opening in the wall, an orifice, stretching wider with every pulse, gaping like a maw. From inside, a noise rose. Chittering. 1,000 insectal whispers, layered over each other like a chorus of starving things. Then, movement. Something crawled out. It was a mass of limbs. Human arms. Dozens of them. Some male, some female, some child-sized. All stitched together into a writhing, walking thing. No face. No center. Just the suggestion of a body built from others. And as it moved closer, Miles saw that some of the hands were still alive. They gripped at the floor. At the air. At themselves. Scratching. Tearing. Praying. One mouth was embedded in its shoulder. It whispered over and over, "Please, please, please." Layla screamed. The thing surged forward. Miles grabbed her arm and dragged her toward a far wall, but it wasn't a wall anymore. It had become a mirror. Their reflection was wrong. In the glass, they weren't themselves. Miles saw a version of himself without eyes. Just pits. Screaming pits. His reflection smiled and raised a finger to its lips. Then the mirror cracked. Then shattered. Behind it, another tunnel. They ran. This tunnel was different. Lit with flickering lights. A hallway that seemed normal at first, white walls, old pictures, hospital-like tile. But the tiles were wet. And the pictures on the walls? They were of Miles and Layla. Childhood photos. Except, in each picture, someone stood in the background. A dark figure. Featureless. Always in the shadows. Those aren't real, Layla whispered. But they were. One showed her in her crib. A shadow stood over her, holding something long and sharp. Another, Miles at the beach, 8 years old. The figure stood in the water behind him, arms stretched wide, like it was about to pull him under. It's always been there, Miles muttered. Watching us. Waiting. They turned a corner and found another door. Carved into it were dozens of words scratched in frantically. Feed it or become it. Give it flesh. Give it memory. Give it yourself. Miles touched the door and flinched. It was warm. It pulsed. I don't want to go in, Layla whispered. I don't want to see what's on the other side. Miles nodded. But he turned the knob anyway. The room was enormous. And in the center sat the feeder. A pulsing, formless shape. Skin like stretched leather, mouths opening and closing across its body. From the mouths came songs, whispers of familiar voices. Theo's. Jules. Even Layla's mother, who had died 2 years ago. The feeder didn't move. It waited. And all around it, were tables. Tables set for a feast. Plates filled with meat. Bowls of eyes. Platters of tongues. Each plate had a name. Miles. Layla. Tigio, half-eaten. Jules, blood still dripping. In the center of the table was a note. Eat, or be eaten. Layla backed away. But behind them, the door was gone. The walls began to move. The mouth started to chant. Feed. 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 Miles stepped toward the table, eyes blank. Picked up a fork. No. Layla screamed. It's tricking you. But it wasn't a trick. Because his stomach was growling. He hadn't eaten since they arrived. And something inside him whispered. You're already dead. Why not taste it? His hand shook. The fork hovered over the plate labeled THO. Then something slammed into him from behind. Layla. She knocked the plate to the floor. It shattered, and from the puddle of gore, Theo's voice rose in a horrible scream. I'm still in here. Miles and Layla fell back in horror. The feeder stirred. It turned, if such a thing could turn, and focused on them. A dozen mouths opened. And screamed. The scream from the feeder didn't sound like sound at all. It sounded like memory being torn in half. Miles and Layla clutched their heads, blood dripping from their ears, as the mouths across the feeder's body bellowed in the disharmony of voices they once loved, their parents, siblings, dead friends, all wailing together in a choir of torment. The floor split beneath them again. This time, they didn't fall. They were dragged. Long tendrils, veiny, slick, sinewed arms, snatched their ankles and wrists, pulling them through the living ground into the level below. They landed hard. Darkness again. But not total. This place had light. Swinging, buzzing meat lights, bulbs filled not with filaments but with flesh, twitching and leaking. Layla sat up and immediately vomited. They were in a slaughterhouse. But not for animals. Bodies hung from hooks overhead. Most were missing faces. Some were flayed open, revealing the pulsing tissue beneath. The smell was unbearable, metallic and sweet, thick with decay. "Jesus Christ," Miles whispered, staggering back. They're people." Layla covered her mouth, weeping silently. Then came the sound. Squelch. Thump. Slice. They turned. And saw him. A man, if you could still call him that. At least 8 feet tall, wrapped in blood-soaked butcher's leather. His head was hidden behind a grotesque mask made of stitched-together faces, stitched so tightly that the eyes twitched independently. His apron was red. His boots squelched as he stepped forward. He held a cleaver the size of a small child. And dragging behind him, a sack. It moved. Twitched. Screamed. "Back," Miles hissed, pushing Layla behind a hanging corpse. "Hide." But the butcher sniffed the air. He didn't see with eyes. He saw with scent. And he had already found them. He lunged. They ran. The hall twisted, bent like intestines. The walls sweated. Every light flickered. Every slab of hanging meat watched them with sewn-shut eyes that bled tears. They burst through a swinging metal door and found themselves in what looked like a preparation room. A long steel table. Chains on the walls. Bones in piles. In the corner, a girl. No older than 10. Pale. Hair matted in blood. She sat curled in the fetal position, muttering to herself. Layla knelt beside her. Hey, it's okay. We're gonna help you. What's your name?" The girl looked up. She had no mouth. Just scar tissue stretched across the lower half of her face. Suddenly, her hands rose. And began to sign. Layla blinked, watching carefully. Then her face paled. She says, "Don't make noise. He's always listening." Too late. A heavy shadow fell across the room. The butcher stood in the doorway. And this time, he wasn't alone. They spilled in from behind him. Others. All masked. All mangled. Victims who had become assistants. Their limbs twisted backward. Their heads sewn with chains. Some dragged sharp implements across the floor, bone saws, meat hooks, rusted shears. And every one of them smiled. Not from joy. From surgical stitching. Miles grabbed a knife off the table and stood in front of Layla and the girl. "Come on, then," he muttered, shaking. "Let's King go." The butcher took one heavy step forward. The others followed. Then. Screams. The lights exploded. The girl's head snapped back, her eyes going white. From her mouthless face came a piercing wail, telepathic, seismic, reality shaking. The butcher stopped. His cleaver trembled in his hand. His assistants collapsed, writhing. Their masks split. Blood gushed from their eyes and ears. Miles dropped the knife and covered his ears, falling to his knees. Layla clutched the girl, whispering, "Stop, stop, stop." The scream ceased. Silence. Then. The butcher stepped forward again. Unaffected. Smiling wider. His mask split open, revealing nothing beneath. No face. Just a gaping black hole where a head should be. And from that void came a sound that would haunt them forever. Chewing. They bolted again, dragging the silent girl with them. Down another corridor, past peeling walls and writing made of blood. At last, they saw a ladder. Upward. They climbed, every rung slick with grime and God knows what. At the top, another door. This one metal, rusted shut. Miles rammed it with his shoulder. Once. Twice. It gave. They tumbled out into a bedroom. And not just any bedroom. Layla's. Her childhood bedroom. It was identical in every detail, the posters, the stuffed animals, the scuffed hardwood floor. But the moment she stood, her mouth dropped open in horror. Because she was already in the bed. A little girl. Herself. Sleeping peacefully. Until her eyes opened. And whispered. "He's still behind you." Layla stumbled backward, eyes wide, staring at her younger self lying in the bed. The child stared up at her, smiling softly. Not innocently. Knowingly. Miles helped the mute girl to her feet. "Where the hell are we?" "This is my room," Layla whispered. "When I was 9. Everything was exactly how she left it, the peeling stickers on the dresser, the dream catcher over the bed, the scar on the closet door where she threw a book after her parents' last fight. Only one thing didn't belong. The mirror. It stood in the corner, tall, freestanding, old. She'd never owned it. And in its reflection. They weren't in a bedroom. They were in the house again. Miles reached for the door. Locked. Behind them, the mirror rippled like water. The room twitched. The younger Layla sat up in bed, smiling with lips that split at the corners, revealing too many teeth. Her eyes leaked black tears. "You remember now, don't you?" the child said in a voice that echoed too deeply. "This is where it began." Layla shook her head. "No, no." "Yes," the girl whispered, sliding out of the bed. Her feet didn't touch the floor. "The night you first heard the knocking." The room dimmed. The wallpaper began to peel, revealing flesh beneath it, pale, veined, and breathing. Knock. 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 3 soft knocks from the inside of the closet. Layla backed away, heart pounding. "I didn't open it," she muttered. "I never opened it." "But you wanted to," the girl hissed. "You wanted to see what was on the other side. And now you're back, to finish it." The mirror shimmered again. And then they were no longer in the room. They stood in a long hallway, lit by flickering overhead lights that buzzed with a low, nauseating hum. Along the walls, doors. Dozens of them. Each labeled with a year. 1989, 1992. 1998, 2005. 2010. And all slightly open. "What is this?" Miles whispered. Layla stared, trembling. "Memories." The mute girl signed, "Don't touch anything. They are watching." From within the open doors came whispers. Failure. Regret. Pain. Layla's breath caught as she passed one labeled 2005. Inside, she saw a flickering image of herself in a bathroom, staring into a mirror, holding a bottle of pills. She grabbed Miles. "We have to keep moving." But the house had no intention of letting them leave. The hallway twisted. Tilted. Then collapsed into a spiral staircase, coiling downward like the throat of a serpent. Each step was made of teeth. They descended slowly, cautiously, the whispering growing louder with every turn. Eventually, they reached a room. A massive circular chamber lined with TVs. Each screen showed them, in real time, in the house, lost, running, hiding. Then the screens flickered. And showed others. Hundreds of people. Thousands. All trapped in this same nightmare, in different versions of the house. Some crying. Some being eaten. Some smiling, their eyes hollow, broken. Miles staggered back. This is a feeding ground." Layla nodded. "A nest," she whispered. "It lures people in." shows them their past, their guilt, their sins. And then it feeds on them. A voice came from the darkness. Not loud. Not menacing. Warm. Maternal. "I've missed you, Layla." She froze. A figure emerged from the shadows, her mother. Just as she looked before she died. Whole. Beautiful. Layla backed away, tears in her eyes. "You're not her. She's dead." "But I remember you," the thing said, stepping closer. "I remember how you cried at her funeral. How you blamed yourself. You should. You always should." Its skin began to crack. Veins pulsed underneath. The face peeled open like a blooming flower, revealing a second skull beneath, teeth chattering in a mockery of a smile. "I never stopped watching you," it hissed. "Even when you changed. Even when you started cutting yourself. Even when you tried to forget." Miles pulled Layla back, and the girl with no mouth began to scream again, soundlessly, but the house responded. The walls shivered. The TVs shattered. The figure lunged. They ran. They burst through another doorway and landed in a room that looked like a cathedral, massive, ancient, Gothic, built of bone and wire. Candles flickered with blue flame. Symbols burned themselves into the walls as they looked. In the center was a throne. And on that throne sat a figure. Not human. Tall, thin, draped in a veil of living fabric, faces sewn together, whispering in agony. Its hands were long, bony, and sharp. And its head was a mirror. A perfect reflection. When they looked into it, they didn't see themselves. They saw what they had done. All of it. All the pain. Every mistake. Every death they felt responsible for. Layla collapsed, sobbing. I can't do this anymore." The figure stood slowly. The house. It had a voice now, made from all the others. "You are mine." Suddenly, the mute girl stepped forward. And smiled. For the first time. She touched the throne. And it screamed. The house buckled. The walls cracked. The sky above the cathedral turned red, bleeding down into the room. The girl's body began to glow with a cold, violet light. Her mouth began to rip open, bloodlessly. And she spoke. This house was built on lies. The throne collapsed. The house shrieked and twisted, its mirror face splintering into 1,000 shards. And in that moment, a door appeared behind them. Wide. Open. Real. Layla and Miles grabbed the girl and ran through it. Everything behind them collapsed inward, sucked into darkness. They landed on the grass. Night sky. Real air. Miles gasped. "We're out." Layla clutched the girl, sobbing. "We made it." But the girl looked back. And whispered. "One more level." The ground split. And they fell again. They fell through nothing. There was no sound. No light. No time. Layla, Miles, and the mute girl plummeted endlessly, like corpses cast into a bottomless grave. Layla tried to scream but had no voice left. Miles reached for her hand, but his fingers bent wrong, like soft wax melting in reverse. Then they landed. But not on the ground. They were standing, inside something. A vast, endless chamber made of pulsing flesh, coiled muscle, and twitching bone. The walls were wet, breathing, stitched together with threads made from hair and veins. The air was thick, heavy with rot, vibrating with the sound of chewing, as though the entire place was digesting. Miles gagged. Layla dropped to her knees. The mute girl stared forward, blankly. In front of them was the mouth. An impossibly large vertical maw stretched open like a wound across the far wall. Rows upon rows of teeth, some human, some not, lined its edges, grinding slowly in rhythmic anticipation. The final mouth. A voice filled the chamber. Deep. Monstrous. Every word caused the ground to ripple and their bones to hum. You've wandered far, little ghosts. But all stories end the same. Layla covered her ears, but the voice bypassed hearing, crawling directly into her thoughts like centipedes burrowing into her mind. You wanted truth? Here it is. The house is not cursed. The house is a mouth. It eats the forgotten, the unwanted, the broken. It digests regret. Layla looked at Miles. He was frozen in place, mouth hanging open, his eyes filled with blood. He was watching himself die, over and over, every possible version. A noose. A car crash. A fire. A blade. Over and over and over again. Layla screamed. But no sound came out. The girl stood beside her, now levitating slightly, glowing with cold, ancient light. Her mouth was almost fully formed now, stitched, raw, trembling. She turned to Layla. And whispered, "You fed it. When you remembered." Layla shook her head, trembling. No. No. I didn't want this. I just wanted to know the truth. And now you do. Suddenly, the chamber began to pulse faster. The flesh undulated. The teeth chattered. The mouth was waking up. Dozens, no, hundreds of figures began to crawl from the walls. Some half digested. Some still alive, moaning, twitching. All of them recognizable. Layla's parents. Miles' childhood friends. Faces from dreams. Victims of the house. Every one of them stared. Whispered. Join us. Stay here. Become part of the house. Forever. The mouth screamed, a howl of hunger and grief, its sound so loud it peeled the skin from their bones, echoing across eternity. And then, the girl stepped forward. Into the mouth. Layla screamed. No. But the girl turned. And finally, she spoke. Clear. Loud. Unbroken. I was the first one. I was the heart of the house. But I don't want to be anymore. She smiled. You gave me back my voice. Let me give you back your soul. She entered the mouth. The entire chamber convulsed. Walls split. Ceilings cracked. The mouth shrieked. It began to collapse inward, devouring itself, teeth grinding through muscle and bone, tongue swallowing its own length. The forgotten souls screamed, some in agony, others in release, as the house began to die. Layla grabbed Miles, whose eyes were clearing, and together they ran, through a passage that opened like a wound healing in reverse. They burst through a doorway. And landed on a quiet road. The house was gone. No trace. No foundation. Just trees. Wind. And silence. Layla lay on the ground, shaking. Miles knelt beside her, breathing hard. Is it over? He asked, voice barely a whisper. Layla didn't answer. Because she saw something in the distance. A mirror. Propped against a tree. Its surface completely black. And in its reflection, the house still stood. Waiting. Watching. Smiling. The end.